to be able to connect the images together so they can all be visible at one time, which is what a composite is, I need additional nodes. And the next node I'm going to talk about is one of the most common nodes, similar to read node, and that is the merge node. Now the merge node can be once again found in the toolbox, in the toolbar under the merge toolbox. And that's one way to add a merge node. I can also right-click in the node graph. I can use the tab key to search for it. But once again, since this is one of the most common nodes, there is a handy one-button hotkey for this, and that is the M key. And this is what a merge node looks like when it's added to a node graph by default. It has 2 inputs and 1 output, and then once again that optional mask input. Similar to the read nodes, as they are created, they are numbered incrementally so they can have unique names. This is my first merge node, so it's merge 1. And as you can see, the function of the merge node is to take 2 inputs, an input A and an input B, and provide 1 output. It combines those 2 inputs into 1 output. However, I have 3 inputs. How would I combine these 3 inputs into 1 final output? Well, the answer is I would use multiple merge nodes. If I merge my first 2 images and then take the output of that merge and merge that in with the third image, I will have combined 3 images into 1. And this is a very common compositing flow for Nuke. An important piece of information for using the merge node is the basic concept that the merge node operates with on the mindset that input A will go over the top of input B. The mantra to remember here is A over B. So for example, my images that I've read in, I have my robot character. I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead a few frames. Here's my robot character waving to the screen. His name is Julius, by the way. And here is the moonscape that he is going to be on top of. Obviously, I want the robot to be appearing on top of the moonscape. So Julius the robot would be A over the moonscape B. If I then select that merge node and hit the 1 key, that will connect it up to my viewer, and once again, I can now see the results in the viewer at the top of the screen. And here we have the robot on top of the moonscape. We're going to go into a lot more detail about the merge node and general compositing in the next chapter. But for now, I want to play around with this so that we have a final composite that we can render out. So I'm going to continue this concept by now integrating some shadows into the shot. As you can see in the main composite, we have the robot on the moonscape, but he has no shadows. And it is a dead giveaway that this is a composite. So I want to add some shadows. The shadows are simply black and white images. And I'm going to use the merge node once again to add these shadows to the moonscape, all of that behind the robot. So the shadows are going to go over the moonscape. I'll hit the M key to add another merge node. The shadows are over, so over is A. The shadows are over the moonscape, so the moonscape is B. Now if I look at this input by hitting the 1 key, this is not what I want. This is taking a very literal interpretation of this image, black and white image of shadows over the top of this image. But really what I want is just the black and the white to go away. Now, unfortunately, this image does not have an alpha channel. Alpha channel provides the transparency that would get rid of this white color, but I don't have that. But that's okay, because the merge node provides me with the ability to do just exactly what I want, which is to turn the white transparent. And I can do that by using the properties panel. By default, the merge node is an A over B operation. I can see that by looking next to the name of the node, where in parentheses it'll tell me what type of image operation it's performing. So merge 1 is set to over, as is merge 2. However, if I double click on merge 2, so that it is in my properties panel, I can change that operation from over to one of the many other image operations. In this case, multiply is what I'm looking for. Multiply will do just that. It'll do a multiplication operation of the pixel values between these two images. And what that ends up doing is turning white, which is 1, into the same color as the image is being multiplied by. And it takes 0, which is the color of black, and makes it 0, because any number times 0 is 0. So by changing this from over to multiply, my shadows now appear on my moonscape, and none of that white imagery is visible any longer. So now I have my shadows on my moonscape. I now need to add my robot over the top of all of that. Now at this point, if you're running out of room in your node graph, you might need to pan around the image or zoom in and out of the image. Now remember, the spacebar key works to maximize our view of the node graph, but that may not be convenient because then we can't see any of our other panes. Instead, it might be easier just to pan or scroll or zoom the node graph, just as we would an image. In order to do that, with our mouse in the node graph area, we can hold the Alt key on our keyboard and left click to grab and drag the image around. When nodes get off the edge of the screen, we'll also get a mini-map view in the bottom right that shows us where we are located in our node tree. This is handy when your node trees grow into the many thousands of nodes. At this point, we only have 6 nodes. We don't really need it, but it's handy to know it's there. If you have a mouse with a scroll wheel that acts as a third button, you can also use that instead of the Alt key to click and drag. And then finally, if we want to zoom instead of scrolling around the node graph, we can use that scroll wheel scrolling up or down to zoom out and in to the node graph. If you don't have a scroll wheel, you can use the plus and minus keys next to backspace on your keyboard, and it has the same operation. So go ahead and make sure all of your nodes are visible, and let's start to clean this up a little bit. These 3 nodes represent my background, and I'm going to feed the input of the next merge node into that first merge operation. And in this way, my robot, which is over the top of my background, finally gets merged over all of these images. If I select that final merge operation and hit the 1 key to bring it to my viewer, I can now see Julius the robot with his shadow on a moonscape. Great. So our composite is done, except we've really only been looking at one frame of the composite. And this frame sequence had many frames. It has some animation. And to handle playback of that animation, I have my playback controls in the bottom of my viewer. So I have all my standard buttons for playback, and I can just click them to begin that operation. And here you can see by hitting the play forward key, the node tree starts to process and slowly the image creaks to life. I can hit stop. I can hit play backwards. And in this case now it's working backwards through the frame range. As each frame is processed in the node graph, it's cached to disk. So the next time my playhead goes over that section of green timeline, it'll play back at a faster speed. For example, here, I'm closer to full speed playback. I can also use keyboard shortcuts in this case. If you're familiar with editing programs such as Final Cut, you might be familiar with the JKL keys. JKL act as play backwards, stop or pause, and play forwards. So J will play backwards, L will play forwards, and K will pause. These hotkeys are useful in that they allow me to ping pong over a particular section by hitting the alternating between the J and L keys. Very handy when doing review of work in motion. One other option to note here is the frames per second window. By default, Nuke has no comprehension of what frame rate your image sequences should be played back at. It only knows what the frame range is, but it doesn't know at what speed they should be played back. The default here is 24 frames per second, but perhaps you're working on a project that's 25 frames per second or 30 frames per second, or something even higher like 48 or 60 frames per second. This field is actually arbitrary and could be any number you like. But just because you enter 60 frames per second, it doesn't mean that the computer is going to be able to play back. The frame rate, the playback frame rate, is limited only by the speed of your computer and its storage. If you find yourself working at a frame rate or with a certain resolution of file where you're unable to achieve satisfactory frame rates, you might need to do the alternate playback solution, which is called flipbooking. The playback inside of Nuke is coming from your disks, but with flipbooking, we actually play back the image from RAM. RAM is, for most computers, the fastest storage medium in the computer. So if you're unable to achieve smooth playback, flipbooking might be your solution.